Hello, and welcome to Brave Embrace. This is a warm place to gather. Well, we will embrace brave with a warm embrace. I'm Kim Case. Thanks for joining us today. This is going to be a wonderful journey of looking at situations that have been tragedies in our life, and we've been able to turn them into triumphs by looking at the hurt, the hope, and the healing that can come when hurt meets a brave embrace. I'm going to take you through a little journey of my own. Some of you have heard this story, but there are a few different pieces to it that I'm going to share today, because what I've been able to take away is an opportunity to be healed. 2020 has been such a wild ride for all of us, and it's time that we stop, reflect, and find some peace as we move into 2021 so that we can enjoy a life filled with hope. I was just 19 when I was stolen in the dark. 4 men, drugged and drunk, out on a wild rampage, out to hurt, steal, kill, and destroy. I'm not sure how that came into my life that night, but I'll tell you what, it changed my life forever. Although I found through time and healing that my story can be rewritten anytime I want. And that's what we want to encourage for you today, is when you get this warm, brave embrace, it's a reminder that at any point we can rewrite our story. As I said, I was only 19. 4 men sentenced to some prison time out on a wild party night. They decided that they would come to Kansas City and they would find someone to harm. Their intent was to kill. It's very clear. There's no doubt. They had all the things they needed: a gun, a rope, a knife, and handcuffs. And as they grabbed me from my driveway, I knew that my life had taken on a completely different path. I tried to jump out of the car as they sped off down my street. Quickly, they pulled me in, put the handcuffs on me, and I knew that life had changed. I was reading some papers recently, some things that I found that belonged to my mom. My mom passed away about 5 years ago, and she had an envelope. Like many of us, we take possessions that are important and we tuck them away. In that envelope, I found articles and stories from that time. I also found a petition that one of these 4 men that followed and kidnapped me had written to the court about that event. He outlined the fact that he thought I was a willing party. He thought because I followed directions and did the things that they said, that somehow I wanted to be there. Part of the betrayal of reading that document reminded me of a betrayal that we often feel in our lives when someone sets out to hurt them. But for me, there were tidbits of brave and hope throughout the nearly 16 hours of assault. One of them was a bent and battered heart buckle. I have it here with me today. And some of you know that maybe have listened to my story before, that for many years I had this hidden away in such a sacred place that I couldn't find it. But it's a joyous thing to hold in my hand again and to remember that this item that was meant for the harness of a horse years ago, I found in a moment of hurt. You see, those 4 men kidnapped me and drove me to a rural area, a farm that had been abandoned. They pulled me out of the car and for hours assaulted me by a creek and under a bridge. I remember looking into the water and seeing the crystal clear flow and knowing that that stream was going the way it was meant to go. Yet my life had taken a turn and it was not happening as it should. I saw the birds, I heard the trees, all of the sounds of nature that make you feel comforted. But instead, I was in the brutal grips of these four men. One of them, the driver, left early on. He decided that he needed to go back to work and pick up his wife. I have attended 6 parole hearings on this offender. This is the 30th year of my survival, yet I am still impacted daily by the memories and the actions of these 4 people that set out to harm me. Do you feel like that in life? Are there things that still affect you daily? When you look into the mirror, you see the hurt, the brokenness, the bent and battered, like the buckle. For me, this buckle meant a sign of hope. So I'm going to ask you today, and in the many episodes to come, where I'll be sharing with other survivors and other folks that have walked out these pain-filled days with hurt people, what those moments of hurt and hope and healing looked like. For me, it's a buckle. So after this man left and went back to work, I was left with 3 offenders. They continued to assault me, beat me physically and sexually. You know, there's a time when a person steps outside of their body as you're dealing with the pain and the loss and the abuse that's happening. And at the young age of 19, it's really difficult to know what you should do next. This is before CSI and all of the shows that we see now with the instant 24-hour news cycle and Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, where we know that things are happening. There I was, stuck in the grips of these assailants. These 4 had a lengthy criminal record. And over the years, it has begged me to question and wonder what drove them to live a life where they would be willing to hurt someone for their gain. It's grieved me, honestly, because I think of these young children that they were at one point, and I wonder what in life encouraged them or led them to feel that this was the only way. My work has taken me into child welfare and into situations to help families overcome poverty and trauma and the cycles that grip us all. This is one of the big reasons that I'm here with you today. My new role is with D. Miller and Associates, PLLC, and I am so grateful to be a part of a team that is looking at these life situations and these life hurts and saying, what can we do about them? This is a law firm made up of compassionate, caring individuals that said, we need an advocate. We need someone to not only care for our staff and the millions of calls that they take yearly and help the staff with those, but we need someone that can help our clients and help serve our staff and attorneys. It's an amazing place to be. It's part of the healing for me, yet it's taken 30 years to get there. I'm going to be dropping hints and words throughout our conversation because for me, it's been about reflecting. It's always about reflecting. Some things we don't see in front of us when we're so busy looking behind us. It's important to remember that when we're turned towards the past, we're not able to embrace the future. That embrace is going to come as a brave embrace with this series. Because every day we see highlights of people serving. I have a daughter that's a nurse. I have a daughter that works in behavioral health and mental health. I have family that are on the front lines. My colleagues are first responders. These are the people that are taking in the accounts and the stories of the hurts. And it becomes somewhat of a heavy load at times. So this brave embrace is meant for not only those that have been hurt, but those that help them, those that care for them. So we're going to highlight stories of brave as we move through this series. We're on this journey together because our happiness matters. I think we see more than ever before that for such a time as this is now. We need to get back to what's real and to what matters. And for me, it means taking a look at this ugly situation that scarred my life and left me feeling broken. I was handcuffed by these 4 men for most of the assaults, which lasted nearly 16 hours. I tried to get away, and they knew that I would keep trying. Have you ever had handcuffs on? It's painful. And in the situation where you're handcuffed to another and all of your rights and abilities are in their care, it leaves a certain amount of trauma and fear and trembling. And that's what I experienced so long ago. Those 4 men were out to harm. And that issue alone has been one of the things that has been hard for me to overcome. How can someone purposefully hurt another? In the news every day, we see tragic situations unfolding. We see abuse by clergy. We see abuse by Boy Scout leaders. We see abuses on college campuses. What is it going to take for these things to stop? It hasn't escaped our offices, our political offices. It has not escaped our entertainment industry. And yet all of these people now are left to suffer. We saw the Me Too movement and the Time's Up movement, and my heart broke at the same time as it rejoiced for all of those who felt safe enough to share their story. But now what? Where do they go? Where do we go? How do we join together? That's what we're going to be doing here in a brave embrace. We're going to talk about the hurts, but we're going to focus on the hope. Sometimes the hope comes in random ways: a call from a friend, a note in the mail, a FaceTime request, since we're not able to leave our homes these days. But even in our homes, the ability to stop and see what we've created and have others join us there, it really brings joy. There's not a particular pathway or roadway that leads us there. It's very individual. And through these series, we're going to talk about a lot of ways to get there. There's mental health and counseling. There's exercise and yoga. There's sports. There are meditation opportunities and earthly things like essential oils and good foods, friendship, laughter. We're going to catapult that into healing because that's what we need to do to get together. I had ended a shift as a waitress at a restaurant just in a suburb of Kansas City. After that night, I met a friend for breakfast, and in our mind, everything was in front of us. We planned to go shopping the next day and to do some exercise, aerobics, kind of like a Jane Fonda workout. I get a little laugh about that when I think about that I actually did that and probably had the leg warmers to match. But everything was in front of us, and I had no idea my life was taking this turn. And in order to turn that into something positive, as I've really tried to do by the grace of God for being alive, it's all boils down to a choice. It comes down to a choice. We choose what TV show we're going to watch. We choose what beverage we want to have in the morning as we wake up. Tea, coffee, soda, water, the smoothie, a shake. We are all capable of making choices. But what I want to share to you from my heart is that the choice sometimes comes down to believing in the power of next. There's a lot in front of us. But when they kidnapped me that night, after they had followed me home from this restaurant, I didn't feel like there was a next. As a matter of fact, I didn't think I was going to make it through that night. And I'll be honest, there is a lot of days that have passed in those 30 years that has made me wonder, why me? Why? I've grieved that as well. I see news reports where loved ones are lost, murdered, not found, children kidnapped and hurt. And I think, why me? It would have been really easy to just roll up in a ball. And there was a lot of times I wanted to do that. And for those friends that know me close, there are times that I do. I'll retreat back and hide myself because I get overwhelmed. I feel a burden. I feel a burden in a good way. I feel a burden in a painful way too, though, that I somehow have to make this matter. I somehow have to show that they did not win. So I set about doing things that would bring hope and joy to others. But in the stillness and the dark of the night, I think back to those hours that I was held captive by those assailants. They've spent 30 years in the Department of Corrections. And while I've had 6 parole hearings on the driver, I have had other parole hearings as well. Every time there's a hearing, it means I have to adjust my life to bring back all of the memories and take in everything that happened. I used to go to the prisons. I'd go in, the doors would be clanking. There was one prison I went to where there were beautiful flowers outside and the sky was blue and the clouds, and it was such a contradiction to what I was about to go to inside. I've done this all while being a mother and a daughter and a friend. And many try and have helped me make it through these moments. As a matter of fact, without the goodness of my loved ones and my best friends, I wouldn't make it. It is dark and it is hard. Just yesterday, as I was preparing to share with you today, I was talking to someone and I looked down and on my phone showed the letters DOC, which is how I've saved Department of Corrections. And once again, in the middle of my day, in the middle of my life, it pops up. And this lets me know that I'm getting a call from the Department of Corrections Victim Services team. It's an automated system that helps me know that there has been a change in status or an upcoming parole hearing. I had one recently. Actually, I've had 4 this year. Can you believe? And it's their right, and I understand it's our process, and it's what we've created here in America as due process and diligence and the justice system. But where is the balance to the scales? I've attended these hearings and I've had friends and loved one go. We usually end the day with some queso dip and a margarita. And that helps me move into the next day and into the next. But I'll be honest, things are changing now. It's a new reality. One of my offenders has been given a date. He's been given a date. And the call yesterday was about him being transferred from one institution to another so that he could do the sexual offender program. It's a couple of year program where he will have to face not only the crimes against me, but any crimes that he may have perpetrated in the past. And if he succeeds, and if there's some sort of accountability, he may be released back out into society. This offender has, 75 years. As a matter of fact, together, all 4 had 375 years. But because of the system and the crazy way things go sometimes, there was a snafu in the way the sentences lined up. Therefore, he is getting an early release date. It's another tragedy that has come to me that I have to deal with. The idea that he might walk in the same state that I'm in. Should I fear? Should I be worried? Should I wonder about my safety? Those are questions I haven't answered yet. But I know together, in a community, there'll be many brave embraces back to me. I admit that hearing about this situation is not easy. And I don't talk about it to make someone go through it. I share it because when I bring light to the darkness that occurred for me, then I see hope. It's just like cracks in a vase. We think that's where the water's going to come out, but also that's where the sunlight's going to get in. It's about perspective. These are some of the things that we're going to discover and talk about in our times together in the coming months. We're going to launch into 2021 with a lineup of amazing guests and friends that will share, and you're going to be inspired. I promise you're going to be inspired. It is a call, and it is an honor, and it is a joy to be a voice for those that have lost theirs, whether they have not been able to speak because the travesties against them were so egregious. There's embarrassment and shame. And believe me, I face the same. When I was reading that petition that offender had written and I found in this envelope that belonged to my mother, it talked about me being willing. It talked about the fact that this offender shouldn't have known that I was in trouble because I seemed to be with them. And I think to myself, how could that be a perspective of that night or situation? And I have to be reminded they were on drugs and they were drinking. However, that fills me with so much regret and pain to think that they somehow thought that this was something I was willing. I was kidnapped, grabbed from my driveway by a man with a gloved hand, handcuffed, and taken an hour and a half, 2 hours from my home. But it still gets to me, the thought that he would put those words on paper and send them to the court. He was asking for a reduction in sentence. And I remember hearing from the court at the time, and they kind of joked that this is just what they do. This is what happens in prison. They write these stories and they draft these pledges. However, the pain, the story doesn't end. And for me, I have to remind myself that this rusty heart buckle is where my hope is. This was assigned to me, and I've chosen to own it and believe it now that I located it. So overtaken by terror, not knowing where my will to survive would come from. Again, at 19, we don't often have some of the abilities to pull into our adult brain that helps us to know what we should do. But I tried everything. I lied and made up stories. I talked about being pregnant and that I had people that would be looking for me. Anything to stop the unbelievable violence and torture that was happening to my young body. At one point, I remember rising above in a way where I could look down and see what was happening. And I just was in unbelief that this was happening to me. I didn't want to go this way. I did not want my family to never know what happened to me. So I set about on this journey of finding my strength. I tried to make them feel as if I were human. Anything that could help them see that what they were doing was wrong. Eventually, the other two violent and previous offenders left the scene, and that left me with one offender. He was also 19, and he was drunk, and at one point, he passed out. We were in a barn, in the loft of a barn. And friends, this barn, abandoned and full of carcasses, rats, snakes, mice, all slithering around. This was where they were going to take my life, and they told me. But I knew that I had a hope and a desire. I knew I didn't want to go that way. And I'll tell you, when he fell asleep and I realized the handcuff was loose, I began to pull. I began to twist and turn until I thought it might actually come off. Now imagine a tightened cuff around your wrist. There's not leeway. And by the grace of God and a lot of scrapes and bruising, I pulled it nearly off. And this offender woke up. He woke up, and I knew he would realize that I was about to escape. But I used some technique that I had used in babysitting or something I had seen on TV, and I just had deep breathing, and I just shushed him back to sleep. And before long, I pulled my hand free and realized that I was able to get away. And I jumped from the hayloft, not down into the pit of hay where the snakes and mice and rats were. I jumped across and down over the other side. I think back now and I'm not even sure how it happened, honestly. I hid. I vomited. I was so afraid I didn't know where to go. These are the moments that we see played out on TV every day. And this really happened to this 19-year-old self of mine, inside screaming, why? What do I do? Where do I go? I saw a house in the distance, and I thought, this is my only chance for real help. And I learned later from the wonderful detective and the team that had worked with me afterwards that I had crossed a gully and a creek and a big area of water and mud, and I have no recollection of that. But I found myself in the yard of this home, and I saw toys, and I saw outdoor things, like I knew that this family was there, but was this the family where they lived? And were there kids there that I was going to be interrupting and traumatizing? I hid for, I don't even know how long. This had been so many hours at this point, not eating, not drinking. My body battered and broken and bruised and bleeding, and not clothed. I had to go to the store, and I asked for help. And the woman that came embraced me so warmly that I can still feel it on my body. My family kept in touch with her for years. She says passed on, but she would celebrate my survival every year with cards. And her and my mom became close friends, as she was the one to open the door and give me the brave embrace that day. She brought me in. I was just hysterical. Tried to call my parents, and I didn't get too far, as I couldn't really make out words, and I was bleeding and had all kinds of injuries. So the sheriff's office was called, the ambulance, and that moment, it pivoted the story. Now, I've said before that just because you escape or leave a situation that's painful, that doesn't mean that you're not stepping into another situation that is equally as painful or worse. And in some situations, what I stepped into was more difficult. The criminal justice system. There were 3 counties, 3 separate jurisdictions where pieces of the crime had happened, and 4 offenders. At that time, they tried them all separately. So each individual offender had a court case against him in each county. And in that envelope I found, from my mother's belongings, I found all the news clippings that she had when there was a guilty plea or a trial. It was a difficult time. My family and friends had to go through the process with me and watch me testify to the acts of these 4 men. I remember in the first hearing, which is called a preliminary hearing, stepping off of the stand and into the hallway, and my father embraced me in such a way, and his groans of pain and anguish for what he was hearing on the stand just enveloped us both, and we nearly fell down. But when they called court to order again, I had to peel myself literally away, peel myself. And I said, Dad, I have to go. And he was sobbing. You know, he's gone now as well. And I truly believe that he feels in some form that he was not able to protect me, and took that to the grave with him. There was a darkness that was over him for all of these years. How do you pick up the pieces after that? How do you move forward? Many of us are asking, because this is a hurt, where does the hope come in? Hope glistened in several different ways. All 4 offenders were found and were held accountable by the system. And as I mentioned, they're all four still in the criminal justice system in Department of Corrections. The two very violent offenders made it all the way to Florida. They stole a car and they were going to leave the country. And they were found by two law enforcement officers that were doing their job that day. They were running traffic. And these two offenders in the stolen car ran a stop sign. And fortunately and blessedly, they were there to apprehend them. I'm not sure what it would have been like if I hadn't been able to go through the system and process it. And I know many survivors have not had that chance. That's why we're here. That's why we're here to embrace this pain and step into the healing, because there has to be a voice to it. And for so many, there's not been a voice. I got lucky. I found a counselor, and she was involved in victims' rights and in the system. And I was able to be a part of some things that were happening in my home state of Missouri around victims' rights legislation and things that moved my healing forward. But I felt alone. There were times when I felt particularly vulnerable. There have been times when my children faced the same age and I felt like they were particularly vulnerable. There's a scar that runs deep in my soul. And I have to choose to find peace there so that I can smile and find joy and move forward. There is a hope that's available. And again, it's found in things like the wind and the trees and the birds and the beauty of a sunset. It's found in hard work. It's found in turning your tragedies into triumphs. You know, there is a saying that you're either buried or planted, and it's all about perspective. For me, being planted is what I chose to be. It's the same motion. Put something in the ground, cover it with dirt, mire, yuck. Is it going to grow? Is it going to be buried? Our pain and our losses are ours to bear. There is a blame that can occur, and it's a natural occurrence, but forgiveness is really the pathway. Not necessarily a forgiveness of them, a forgiveness of the loss in what you've experienced, a forgiveness that releases you from the hurt and the shame and the pain. It's like we are made for something better. We're made for the next. And we have to be willing to rise above the pain and the loss, rise above what happened, rise above a situation like this horrible victimization that happened. We have to know that we can find a voice. I want to talk to you a little bit about the healing process. But in order to do that, I need to share a couple of things. Not only for me has it been things like this heart buckle, but it's also been journaling and writing. I'm going to encourage you today to find a place to put your hopes and your dreams and your hurts and your losses. This beautiful book was given to me by a group of my lovely girlfriends, and I have been blessed to have such a tribe of people to support me and encourage me to find hope. They listen to the pain, they encourage me in moments like this, and they know that the heart and soul of healing is all about the choice, and we work through those things together. But I want to remind you of a couple of things. There is a certain way that we're born. We have a DNA to be brave. Did you know that? Think back to the ancestors and those that have come before, and think of the challenges that they have faced. They have faced pandemics. They have faced wars. They have faced depressions and losses of loved ones and children to disease. There is a bravery that can be found, and it's in our DNA. I have this beautiful oak tree in my backyard. It's about 100 years old or more. Everyone that comes to visit sees it and loves it, and it's gorgeous, but it drops a lot of acorns. And every time about this, this season, it begins to drop these little acorns. So I brought this here to show you some of these acorns because I want to remind you all that this little acorn has everything that it needs to be that big oak tree. It doesn't have to look for anything or wish that it had something. All it has to do is believe it can be a big oak tree. Sometimes you see them planted in little sidewalks or alongside things where an oak tree wouldn't go. As a matter of fact, I saw an oak tree near my neighbor's house that was trying to grow up near her foundation. But remember, it goes through seasons. There's the dry season. There's the beautiful season. There's a season where there's sun and bright and shade from the leaves. That's what we need to think of our time in life and the way that we are made. We are made to be brave and to be whole. My counselor once gave me an affirmation, and that is that you're perfect, whole, and complete. And sometimes I say that to myself just to remind myself that I have everything inside myself, just like a little acorn, everything I need to overcome. The story that was pushed on my life 30 years ago is not the story that was meant for me. I can rewrite it. It's all about my decision to do that. If you look at any type of nature, you think of the adversities they face and the way that darkness comes. They might be planted in rich soil or planted in non-fertile soil, but they still find a way to succeed. And that's where we are. There's a system that I like to use, and it's called the ABC method. And I'll share this sometimes with friends. And sometimes it's like, they'll say it's a bunch of caca, Kim, because ABC is like, this is not that simple. But basically what it is it's looking at adversities, beliefs, and consequences. Okay? The adversities we face all are framed in our perspective and our belief about those. So if you think of some of the adversities you have faced in the past or that you're facing now, maybe write them in your journal. Maybe write them in a space where you can look at the hurt, look at the heartache. And then I want you to write next to it what you believe about that. Do you believe that it was not fair? Do you believe that it was not your fault? Maybe you believe that an adversity was something that you were responsible for, and that means a change in behavior is needed. Belief is the way that we frame it. And I had this shown to me yesterday. I was talking with a friend, Jen, about this live, and it was actually when I got that call from Department of Corrections, and I'm seeing the DOC come up. And I'm panicking because here I am preparing to share, and I'm excited, and I'm feeling whole. In the middle of it, I get knocked down on my knees because here it is again, this call, Department of Corrections, what's happening? Did an offender escape? Is there, another hearing coming up? And so in our conversation, I was saying something about the fact that it's interesting how sometimes those negative things happen and people can, call it evil, or if you're spiritual, it might be your view of Satan, or it might be just bad energy coming your way, whatever your perspective on life and how these things affect us. But it hurt, and it took me down at my knees for a minute, and I was frustrated. But then I tried to rally and say, you know what? Not today. I'm going to push through because I'm excited about this. I've got some things I want to share. And she listened and agreed. And then later she sent me a message back, and she said, what if it's really, truly the good? What if this is meant to show you and remind you of what is inside of you? That what you're about to share and what is powerful for someone to hear, your story of overcoming, your story of rising against adversity, maybe that was a message to remind you, Kim, that you have risen from adversity and that you have overcome, because we all feel like imposters sometimes in our own life, in our own hopes and dreams. Who am I to speak, to you today and encourage hope and encourage, you to be brave? only because I faced these adversities. And it was an interesting reframe. And I stood there and I stepped outside for a bit and I took a couple of breaths of air and I thought, that's a really good point. And the takeaway from that is that we're all in this together. We really need each other. We need a brave embrace to remind us sometimes that step by step, day by day, it's all going to be okay. Because the C part of that ABC equation is all about the consequence. And the consequence is that after this adversity and my belief about it, that this was not fair, this was something that caused great hardship, but the consequence is that I can choose to use it in a way to share hope. There have been thousands of hours I have sat with people that have been hurting. And I don't say that to say, oh, I've done something great. I say that it has enriched me so much to share so deeply with people and to be with them in these dark moments, because we're not going to get away from it. I mean, we've just gone through this crucial year of 2020. We're still hanging on, but we need each other. We need to embrace each other's brave. And that's what these stories, wrapped in hope and healing and love, can do. There's a certain amount of time that we need to remember that we have to trudge forward. We have to be like warriors. We have to choose to overcome. Just like the oak tree that grows from the acorn, just like the pine tree that makes the beautiful acorns and pine cones. We have to know that we were meant for good, and our story can be rewritten at any time. So when you look at your adversity, you change your beliefs about it, challenge, reframe, or accept, and then look at the consequence that has on your day-to-day. Does that inspire hope? Does that inspire stillness? Does that inspire your brave? I know as a 19-year-old girl, I probably wasn't the bravest thing. I've got a brother. There were times we would struggle and fight, and he's the best brother in the world now, my brother Mike, I'll tell you what. But he probably didn't think I was that brave. He and his friends would torment me and tease me. But 30 years ago, when this came upon me, I dug deep and I believed that there could be hope. I saw that heart buckle and I realized that it's all about perspective. I set about finding hope and strength. I got involved with the system and I worked to change laws and I worked to close gaps and I worked to make things better so that different parts of the system maybe wouldn't be as painful, wouldn't be as re-traumatizing. I'll tell you what, it's been a journey and there's a lot more ahead as I'm now joined with this team of people that are dedicated to making a difference. We've got to be together in this, friends. And this Brave Embrace experience is going to be just that. There are going to be times when you're feeling hurt and you're feeling like there's no hope. But we have to remember that our story's been written and it's been redeemed. And all we have to do each day is find joy. Look at the consequence of the change, of belief in our adversity, and know that we can rise above. I'm so excited that we're going to be on this journey, and I hope that you'll join me for future episodes, because these crucial conversations born out of dark times and difficult moments are important to be said. It's crucial that we come together to embrace brave with a brave embrace. Thank you.